Good morning. No smiles. Good morning. Доброго ранку. Дякую. Доброго ранку всім. Це надзвичайно приємно бути тут. Я привітаюся одне речення українською мовою з тим, щоб ми не забулися, де ми знаходимося. Дякую за запрошення, дякую за цю організацію. Думаю, гарний шанс для того, щоб ми всі отримали насолоду від спілкування. І незважаючи на те, що кількість людей тут, очевидно, promising. Да? Тобто ми побачимо більше значно на протязі сьогоднішнього дня і пізніше, але ми маємо задати початок гарним настроєм. Тому дякую всім, хто сьогодні є, і я хотів би спитати, скільки у мене часу. How much time is offered for the speech? 20 minutes? 10? 20. Okay. So, very good morning to all of you. I'm here just to start to the speeches regarding the latest trends of Ukrainian banking system developments. I'm offered to say a few words or a few slides in our language to present our bank results and to speak shortly about Raiffeisen Bank Aval. And next I will focus my speech mostly on banking system developments, threats, challenges, achievements. And let me start with the slide number 1. I named the presentation Still the Rocky Road. My advisors, they did present me the draft with much longer name where threats were dominating. I'm not the person who is pessimistic enough to appear as an audience and to talk that we have no future. Rocky roads, in my understanding, is something we should take over, something we should overcome, and something we really know how to manage. Many of our shareholders in different countries that have subsidiaries in Ukraine quite often not clear understanding of the rules, written and unwritten rules in Ukraine. It's our role here in Ukraine to manage institutions in the environment we have. We have many unwritten rules, and this rocky road for us is a road which operates last 10, 20, 30 years, depends on the banks operated in Ukraine. We feel here in Ukraine this rocky road is our own. We know how to do that. We manage it in known tools, which were checked during the last 3 crises during the 20 years of Ukrainian independence. So, Raiffeisen Bank International. This is a company who has subsidiaries, banks in 17 markets. Here's a map you may see. This is the leading banking group in Austria. Regards both Austria and 17 markets in Central Eastern Europe as a home market. In Austria, this is a leading bank for corporate and investment banking. In other countries, other markets, that's universal banks operate with more than 14 million customers, 60,000 employees within the network of 3,000 outlets. Raiffeisen Bank Aval is the subsidiary of Raiffeisen Bank International. We have in Ukraine 822 branches. We have more than 13,000 employees. There are more than 3 million customers are being served in our branches all over the country. Within this 3 million, we have 220,000 of corporate customers, and close to 3 million are private individuals. Are we big? Yes, we're big. Our brand was previously known in the market as the biggest, nearest bank. So we're present in each of the big village or towns, and we are perceived as one of the biggest bank, or a biggest bank. Now we are number 4 by assets. If someone will ask me, is it the failure or is it achievement? It's difficult to answer directly. We care very much for profitability, and the competition for the market share for the time being is not in the agenda of our bank, and to my understanding is not in the agenda of our main competitors. That was the story of 2008, when the whole banking industry grew up 70% by total assets annually. 4 years before the crisis, banking industry for Ukraine grew up 70% annually. And that was a time when the competition and market share was targeted, and we reported to shareholders, to public about growing market share, taking over new and new customers, opening new and new tools, products, others. Now we now have something to eat after this growing. And this is the non-performing loans, and this story I will present on other slides. So number 4 in assets, we say we are comfortable with that as a bank. We have, you may see that we have 32 million euro net profit after tax in the first quarter. We can predict we will have more to the end of the year. A few changes we did because mostly challenged by crisis, where we optimized our network. And you may see 822, 13,000 employees. Earlier there were 18,000 employees, and there were 1,200 branches. How much is enough for Ukraine? We have our calculations, and I mentioned the efficiency and profitability is the driver of all our reforms and institutional developments. By total assets, we now serve 4.8 billion euro assets. And, sorry, there should be another slide. No, that's only me who could read this. So we did make centralization projects, and by number of actions or by our activities, we cut number of outlets. You may see 27% and 20% of staff. Not a pleasant job, but I would say I don't know one bank who doesn't care now about the size, efficiency, and profitability. So we believe very much that Raiffeisen Bank Aval is in line with the shareholders' expectations and our all stakeholders' expectations. So, banking industry. I will appreciate you advise me 5 minutes before the end. Thank you. I spoke already that the banking industry of Ukraine was growing as a rocket with a 70% assets growth annually before 2008. You may see loan to deposit to GDP ratio on the left slide, with a high rocket in year-to-year growth. And GDP, loans to GDP were in 2008 at the level of 80%. The slide to the right shows that we were far above the average ratio where GDP and loans are correlated in 2007. That was up to 80%. Now, we may see that we are dropping to the average level. Still, we are above this correlated ratio. Now we 56-55 loan to deposit ratio. Lending growth, I slightly commented this. We may see that starting from 2008, the year-to-year growth is close to zero. The faltering economic growth, restrictive monetary policy, deteriorating business climate. So all these things make us to grow very slowly. Are we happy with this? No. Why? Because 82% of total income comes from interest margins. And if assets are not growing, there is no expectations our income will grow. And the only area where we get growth of our income and to increase our returns is the cost optimization. So all of us and our bank, we look for the triggers how to make lending growth more than 1 or 2% annually. Still in our focus, we expect the growth of total loan portfolio will not be higher than 1 digit in 2013. Steady de-dollarization. I think many of those who come to Ukraine from different markets faced the same problem of devaluation of local currency. Not as much as Ukraine faced in 2008, but still many countries have their lessons, and Ukrainians have their lessons as well. So our loan book was more than 50% issued in foreign currency, mostly dollar, And with the dollar evaluation in 2008, the non-performing loans reached over 30% in the average in the market. There are different numbers you may face in different articles or different overviews and researches. We make our comment based on IMF and World Bank assessment. We confident with that. We have our own experience in our bank, so 30+% non-performing loans is a big lesson. So de-dollarization is in the agenda of the regulator, is in the agenda of each individual bank. There are few restrictions, important restrictions to lend money in foreign currency. So there is a prohibition for lending in foreign currency to private individuals. No loans in dollar, no loans in euro, only for corporate customers and those who have export inflow from their operations mostly. So all this with a high price of local currency funding makes lending growth questionable, difficult, and the main priority of strategies in Ukraine, how to make it more. The biggest problem in this direction is pricing. The average pricing for local deposits for 12 months at these days approximately 18%. 18% in local currency make possible lending more than 22-23%. Banks need margins 4+ to justify their activities because of big cost of non-performing loans. So this pricing of 18% average makes lending very limited to only to those industries who need short-term funding because of high price, and those who have a strong financials in the long run. As I mentioned already. A few words about non-performing loans that I say the biggest challenge for many of us who faced 2008 with the universal banking activities, lending money for SME, from private individuals, for micro business, mostly in foreign currency because of the pricing I mentioned already. This is the developments of last 6 years of non-performing loans. You may see the average at the moment is more than 30% to some estimations. At the same time, the peak of growth we already passed, which is good news. What we're doing in Ukraine with the non-performing loans, we do what any market is offered. 5 minutes, thank you. We collect money, we have internal and external collectors, I may say well developed, by tools, by communications, by database, by experience for the last 5 years. We have written off procedures which now agreed and has less complexity and less dependence of tax consequences. We have different kind of restructuring models that allow customers to collect money and to serve the loans. At this stage, what we look for the further steps to be implemented in the market is the selling of loan books, of portfolios. There are a limited number, up to 20 after 5 years, sounds very modest. Not many, not enough. The main blocking factor is uncertainty in the tax consequences, and we have still to clarify all possible risks in this way. Not done yet. At the same time, banking industry, I would now focus a few minutes on the positives. We have quite fragmented banking sector, 170 plus banks. You may see 10 banks, top 10 banks carries the share of average 60%, and 5 top banks are below 40% of concentration. So concentration is not high. Is it good or not? I would say to my experience, I couldn't say this is bad. The absence of the leader or 2 or 3 leaders in the market makes competition challengeable, makes pricing more transparent because of the many of propositions are in the market. And this competition for the last 20 years created such spirit of long-run, fair, committed participants. So I'm 30 years in banking, and last 15 years there is a real strong competition, and I would confirm here in the audience we have a fair competition compared with all other areas of communities developments when we are commented by high corruption, high shadow economy level and others in banking industry. That's very important to say. We feel comfortable in a competition to each other, and number of banks is one of the trigger that created such kind of balance of what we are doing in the market and how we are doing in the market. At the same time, some analysts say that the trend of concentration is ongoing, and we can expect less number of banks. Firstly, because of the modest or very low financial results of many of banks here in the market, and we cannot expect improvement of the economic situation, and GDP forecasts confirm that for the next 2-3 years, that conditions for banks will be much better than we have today. Regulation. A few words about foreign banks, because Raiffeisen is the most Ukrainian among foreign and the most foreign among Ukrainian banks in Ukraine. That's what I quite often say. So we have more than 20 banks with the international capital here in Ukraine. You may see that the latest developments of after crisis moved the share of international banks from 45 to 20 now in total assets of banking industry. There are few banks already left the market, and there are few banks that now are in negotiations of selling the institution. Some analysts may predict to the end of 2014 there will be 10% of foreign banks in Ukraine. This trend has different arguments, different factors, and not everything is coming from Ukraine. I guess you know the capital requirements and Basel II in 2012 were very radical to review the strategies of subsidiaries in some countries, including Ukraine. That was one of the arguments we faced. Fortunately for Raiffeisen, we were successful in reaching these capital requirements for the group, and we have confirmed strategy for Ukraine to stay in Ukraine. Some banks did make a different solution, and they left the market. To other very important argument that the business strategies that justified the acquisition of local Ukrainian banks were mostly based on high growth of the market. And pre-crisis growth, 70% of total assets, were the big trigger for many investors to come to justify the investment. They were from 3 up to 5, 7 book value deals in Ukraine during 2007-2008. With this crisis effect, growth of the market is 1-2% annually, required to change the strategy. And with the low volumes and low assets, the investment is not much justified. That's another one reason. The expectation from the Ukrainian market is not very bright for the next 2-3 years, and this triggers to review the strategy. Final statement. You may see it confirms the return on equity 3% is not very bright for many of investors, international investors, to come to Ukraine with these specific conditions. Absence of long-term resources. This NPL ratio is still high, At the same time, low inflation allows us to manage financials in a clear and understandable way with a longer terms than we did in 2009-10. Stable local currency sounds in different audience sounds challengeable because local currency depreciation is quite often in Ukrainian agenda of many industries, especially in autumn. But last 4 years it was managed in an effective way, and we expect there is no reasons for local currency devaluation in 2013 and 2014. This forecast comes from Raiffeisen research. And the regulatory requirements, we feel as international banks that regulatory requirements are very close to international requirements. We report into Vienna, or report into central bank, we feel that the more and more harmonization of the reports and harmonization of the tools implemented. The list of these changes is presented here. I guess if someone wants to take a presentation, it will be copied and presented to all participants. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward for your question, I guess, during the next panel session, right? Thank you.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.